Hey guys, and welcome to a brand new Rugby Union podcast. This is the Rugby Down Under podcast, where we talk all things international rugby. We talk about the series rankings and the World Rugby Rankings and who's going up, who's going down. We try and focus on the top 25 teams, and we discuss all the games that have gone on recently. As you'll see today, guys, we speak all about the Australia versus France, both tests, the game 1 and game 2. We speak about New Zealand, Viti, baby, get around the Fijians, who had a great game there. Also, we speak about pretty much all the teams, inside that top 25. Now, the biggest climbers and in the biggest droppers, we will go over pretty much entirety of the World Rugby Rankings. And basically, we're just going to sit back, we're going to kick back, we're going to have a chat, have a bit of a laugh, and talk about some rugby, baby, because I love my rugby. And obviously, rugby season, international season, is red hot right now. We are getting a lot of games, which is brilliant, because in 2020, obviously, we had a bit of a tough year in regards to not getting a great deal of rugby. But obviously, this podcast is going to be coming out every single week, guys. So go down there, hit that subscribe button, and smack that thumbs up button to show that you are enjoying it. But I'm not here by myself. I do have the Kiwi lads, who is a man from All Blacks Town. Give us a bit of a rundown about yourself, man.
Well, my name is Hamish, and I do love myself a bit of rugby from New Zealand, of course. So there is that trans-Tasman connection in regards to the fact that the Rugby Championship coming up, as well as Tri-Nations as well. But like you mentioned, huge amount of rugby on in the near future. Like, we have got back-to-back games this weekend. Absolutely. So it's going to be pretty awesome to see all those results. Like, we have seen some interesting ones in the past little while, which we will be running through on this podcast as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, obviously, you've got your own YouTube channel as well with the Kiwi lads, where you do your streams, just like I do my streams. But Wallabies perspective over here, All Blacks perspective over there. It's it's good that we kind of come together with the Bledisloe Cup rivalry, I guess, and talk about everything. Because although we do love our Southern Hemisphere rugby, because you're always back in the Southern Hemisphere when you're down here, but obviously Northern Hemisphere rugby has some great teams too, with England and France and Wales, but we'll get into them in a second, Ireland and the like. So, I'm looking forward to get into it. Before we obviously get chatting about the games, we need to know what the actual scores were. Obviously, there was quite a lot of rugby in the last week or so. So, Hamish, obviously you can do the honours here. What were the games like? What were the results that we saw in the last week or so?
Well, we will be starting with that first game, which I know is close to your heart, and that was the Wallabies taking on France. That first match, right at the last minute, the Wallabies able to get that win, 23 points to 21. And what was one of the most nerve-wracking moments, I feel, for Wallaby supporters in a long time. But France as well, unfortunately for them, they didn't quite get that win when possibly they should have. But as we know from that second game, maybe they got a little bit of revenge.
Let's just wait. We'll talk about that one in just a few moments. But let's just, let's not talk about that loss just yet, because it's still bloody fresh in my heart. My goodness me, I'm frustrated there. But what else was happening?
Well, Sharks versus the British and Irish Lions. The first match was 54 points to the British and Irish Lions, 7 to the Sharks. And at the time, that seemed like the only time we were going to get to see those two sides play off. But then, of course, we have had COVID cases all over the place in the British and Irish Lions tour at this stage, which did mean originally that one of the games did get postponed, which was going to be the British and Irish Lions taking on the Bulls. So to give them a little bit more preparation, they actually took on the Sharks again. And that second match was extremely close for the starting moments of our halftime, 26 to 26. But in the end, unfortunately, there was a big moment early on in that second half, the red card of Jaden Hendrickson, which then led to the end score being 71 to the British and Irish Lions, 31. The next game that we did get to see was Samoa taking on Tonga for the Rugby World Cup qualifying match, putting them into Group D. Whoever can have the best aggregate score over the two matches, one last weekend, one this weekend. But in that match, Samoa were able to get the win, 42 points to the 13 of Tonga, so a big win in that regard. Then the next game straight after that, we did get to see the All Blacks in action for the first time this year, and also Fiji, I should mention.
Tosso Viti, baby. Tosso Viti, Lego Viti. All right.
I actually, unfortunately, messed up the name of Fiji, even though it is only that 4 letters, but they had a pretty decent game in that game up against the All Blacks.
Did you mess up? How did you mess up
Fiji?
Fiji? No, so good, man.
I don't know. I think I went Fiji.
Probably because I was saying Viti at the time as well, and you just but anyway, go on, man.
No worries. But then from there, the draw for Wales, Argentina. Interesting couple moments in that game as well, which I feel like that's going to be very exciting to see the second match in that regard.
But we'll definitely be talking about the fact there was a red card and a yellow card there. That'll be interesting because there was 2 yellow cards. They were all the same, both at the same time too.
Yeah, the referee was just like, yeah, get off. But now, then there was a game that was happening in Europe Netherlands versus Portugal, and Portugal having a big win there, 61 points to the 28. And of course, they are getting a mention because of the fact that they are, I was going to say, relatively up there in the rankings.
Well, Portugal are top 20, so I think they're in the 20th position, and I will talk about what I think about Portugal, because I think they're actually pretty good. And, this podcast, guys, we're going to really refer to the top 25 because it gets a bit of a drop there. So, yeah, we definitely will be talking about the Netherlands and Portugal game.
And it was actually, there were some pretty decent moments in there. We quite enjoyed one of the tries that we will mention a little bit later on, scored by the Netherlands. Then the next game, England taking on Canada. And in this one, in the end, England were able to get the win 70 points to 14, which then after that game, we also had Ireland versus the USA, which very similar scoreline, 71 points to the 10. So both sides trying to outdo each other a little bit. Ireland getting 1 point extra there. And then, of course, the next game, Wallabies versus France, the second matchup, which I know, it's an interesting result, wasn't it?
Oh, well, I was streaming it. Yeah, I wasn't too happy. You guys can see my stream, and you can see I was banging my table. I was getting pretty heated. I thought that was a absolutely terrible performance, but let them know the score, and then we'll get talking about the Australia versus France game, and I'll be talking about a few decisions and by Mr. Hooper that was probably a little bit debatable there. But go on, my good sir.
Well, 28 to 26 in that one. And of course, both of those games, only 2-point differences when you look at those Wallabies and France games. So the third one this weekend, it will be the decider, which is always
a good one. But there's a lot better of a lineup for Australia this time around. There is a lot better of a lineup for this time around.
That is true indeed. And then the most recent game that we have had for international rugby, kind of international, I should say, we have got the British and Irish Lions. They were continuing their tour, and they were taking on South Africa A, or as some people have called them, the Springboks, because they had a lot of very good players in that side. That they were able to get the win, 17 points to 13 in a very close contest. A few yellow cards, a lot of penalties in that one as well. But we will go into that in depth just in a little moment.
Exactly right. Well, obviously the biggest climbers this week, guys, we had Ghana jumping from 87 to 85. There was France who went back. They actually went down from 5 to 7 or 4 to 6 or something like that. And then now they're 6 to 5 because obviously there has been those two games between France and Australia in the last week. Then we had Wales who jumped from 7 to 6. That was because obviously they got the draw, plus also Australia did lose, which then put them behind them again. We do have Pakistan, 95 to 94. I never thought I would have been mentioning their name in rugby. And we've got Rwanda from 96 to 95. So a couple of sneaky little changes down the bottom area of the World Rugby Rankings. So I think there's about, 111 teams, something like that. I'm not too sure. Biggest fallers, however, we had Algeria from 92 to 97. So they dropped 5 spots. That's pretty hefty considering it's down that lower end of the rankings. Australia, obviously 5 to 7 after that loss, even though they won. Austria, 85 to 86, and then Finland from 86 to 87. But obviously the big game we need to talk about first here is the Australia and France. We'll go game 1 first, obviously, and then we'll talk about game 2 after that. But game 1, Australia won, very close. It was a interesting game because for me, man, I thought that Australia wasn't exactly the greatest team. Obviously, this is a French team that has thrown a lot of youngsters over here. And I guess this is really proving their depth in this French team. It's really proving that they have a quality squad, even without their first grade squad that we obviously know all about. So it's going to be very interesting to see this game 3. But look, in that first game, Australia really lucked out. Really, they really lucked out because the French had that ball off the line out. They just kept throwing it back, but Australia found a way to get it. This was after the 80th minute. And then they just find a way to get a penalty, but they still couldn't score a try, even though it was just, they were right on the line. So very frustrating. Don't think Australia was great. What was your thoughts, man?
I mean, overall, like looking at some of the stats, 68% possession for the Wallabies in that game. And it was actually pretty similar in the second matchup as well in terms of that possession. So they had all the ball. And unfortunately for them, they just weren't quite able to link up in that back line. Like 14 penalties against France in that first match as well, compared to
France
the 6
were very
ill-disciplined
in that first game. They were very, they gave away a lot of penalties and they were just really, they knocked the ball on quite a lot in that first game. They were pretty poor. Like they were really poor and inexperienced, obviously, in the end, but they made they were very ill-disciplined and the Australians still had to wait until after the 80th minute to actually take it over.
Because that's the thing. Imagine if that last line out had gone to plan, that would have been a win for France. And then who knows what would have happened in that second game, whether or not it would have been 2-0 at the moment.
Well, to be fair, I think Australia probably would have taken a better, more stronger team into that second game if they had have lost that first game, because obviously the second game there was quite a few players that weren't on there. Obviously McDermott wasn't there, and Tate McDermott and Jake Gordon. I just said Tate Gordon, I'm all over the shop, but obviously McDermott wasn't there, and there was quite a few players that were changed around. Taniela Tupou had come on and started instead of the first game where he's usually off the bench, because I find he's great as a super sub. And yeah, man, I think that probably would have changed the aspect of the second game. So either way, I think that Australia wins at least one of them.
And that's the thing, like France overall, even though it's weird, even though they gave away so many penalties, had so many handling errors, like their tackling completion rate was actually better than the Wallabies. They made 160 tackles, only missing 14. The Wallabies made 73 and missed 16. So it's one of those ones that in their right moments, even though, yes, there were the penalties against them, like they were still able to defend relatively decently at times, like throughout that match. I mean, the way that they started with Villiers getting those first 2 tries, like it looked like they were off to an absolute
absolutely
start.
I thought we were going to get done dirty. I thought that was going to be the most embarrassing Wallabies performance I've seen in quite some time, but obviously we were able to come back, and realistically, and we'll get to the second game in a second, but realistically the second game was very similar in that. Actually, you know what, we can kind of intersect the two of them because they are very similar, just the switched result, I guess. They were very similar. It's just Australia in the second game were disgustingly bad. Like I'll say it, like I've never seen a more poor performance from the Wallabies. Yes, we had a lot of a younger and different team to kind of test the mark and see what's going on right now. But, there wasn't any. I was expecting improvement. I was expecting us to win that second game by a lot. I was expecting us to win by about 21 with the teams that were put out there, but obviously we lost.
And that's the thing. Other than, I guess you'd say maybe 2 or 3 players for the Wallabies, everyone else probably just didn't really have the performance that they would have liked. I mean, Koroibete, like by himself,
Koroibete was awesome. Koroibete was very good.
Putting in a shift. Like he would have had, if there wasn't for the knock on of Tom Wright and then the 4 pass originally, like he could have been sitting almost on a hat trick there. Marika Koroibete, like he was on fire, and it seemed like all they needed was just one of those ones to go right for them in that one early on. Like he was phenomenal.
I think if Koroibete does score that, and it doesn't get called for a forward pass, I think we go on to win that quite well too, because that would have been a try in the first, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. And instead of, and this is where I'm going to bring up the decision making of Hooper, where instead of that, we then proceeded to a few minutes later get a penalty from right in front. And instead of going for the try, which was the correct call, absolutely, we ended up going for the 3 points, and we were down 6-0 at the time. Actually, I think it was a little bit later, actually, but we were down 6-0 to the French. We originally would have been, with that try to Koroibete, I think this was before the 2 3-pointers, wasn't it?
I think they had 1 at that stage, France.
It could have been 3-0, and then, Koroibete does that. So, anyway, point matter is that, I think if he gets that try, it changes the complete outlay of the game. We get an early try, unlike what happened in the first game, and it really sets it aside. I think that the Wallabies are still tracking quite well, to be honest with you. I think that they're checking out what's the best way for them, and obviously Game 2 was not for them, because realistically, who gives a shit about this game? Who gives a shit about the World Rugby Rankings? Like, realistically, that's not what we're here for. What we're here for is to learn for the Rugby World Cup in 2 years' time, right? So it's all well and good that we lose this game if we're trying to see what's best for us. We win the first game where we were still trying to see what's best for us. And now this third game, I really feel like it's a much stronger team where they've put all the positives and negatives from Game 1 and Game 2. But as a Kiwi, as an All Blacks fan, what would you say? Would you say that the Wallabies are looking good right now, or would you say that they're not looking good for the future?
Oh, for the future, I was going to say...
Or just like from what you've seen so far, what are you seeing of their tracking progress?
Like, because for Super Rugby Trans-Tasman, I feel like from like a lot of Kiwis, like we were giving them a lot of slack, like not me included. I am always like trying to be pretty impartial in regards to kind of the Trans-Tasman rivalry, but it was one of those situations that like everyone was just constantly saying how bad like Australia were playing, but I felt like they did pretty decent in a lot of those games.
That's domestic teams, bro. That's domestic teams. Like, they're bad. I'll tell you they're bad. I'll say they're bad. Then they're not great. All 5 New Zealand teams finished above the 5 Australian teams. Like, I don't really know. What are you trying to say here?
Although I am transitioning into the factor of, for those individual sides, they all had their standout players who are then now in that Wallabies side. Like the loose forward trio, you got Valentini, you got Hooper coming back from Japan, of course, and then Harry Wilson, who just had phenomenal form in Super Rugby Trans-Tasman for the Reds. So I feel like looking at what they were able to do individually for their sides that were struggling, like to now put them into a side altogether, like give them a few games together, I feel like that chemistry can really build up leading into those games up against the likes of the Pumas. I mean, we know how unsettled like that kind of result is because of the fact they drew twice last year with the Pumas. No one really knows who.
Kind of. Like they drew twice. They did draw twice, but in the same sense, you've got to remember that realistically, the team didn't draw twice. Reece Hodge drew twice because he missed 2 of those kicks basically on the sideline that were very easily kickable kicks. And I'm sorry, I'll give him an excuse for was it Wellington where he missed the kick against the All Blacks and that was a draw. I'm not sure if that was Wellington or where that was, but anyway, he missed that kick there. I let that being fine because it's a windy stadium. It's very difficult to kick it from past 50. It was kind of raining. But then you move to those 2 games against Argentina, and although one of them was really wet and rainy as well, the fact of the matter is that we have the ability to win both of those games, and he missed both of those kicks from pretty easily kickable positions for a rugby union player, for a rugby union kicker. So, look, I think he's a good kicker, but I think that, we choked away that Tri Nations. But go on with what you're saying.
So pretty much, I think in this situation, like, I feel like they're not going to do too badly in the Rugby Championship. Like, I feel like those games against the Pumas are going to be pretty contestable. I even like the games against the All Blacks. The All Blacks aren't in the best form at the moment.
Absolutely. I'll be talking to you about that later as well. Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like it's going to be one that if they can really, like, Korobetti out on one wing, if he runs the way that he is and get that back line going as well with the likes of Paisami in the midfield, linking up. Pattaya will be returning soon. He had a pretty decent Super Rugby AU. So it's one of those ones. I like the look of their backline. McDermott, for such a young player, seems to have such like
he definitely needs to be there over Gordon
ability.
Absolutely.
You don't like Gordon?
Oh, look, man, he didn't have a good game. Let's put it that way. It was not his game in that one. And I'm happy to come out here and say that McDermott absolutely should be there. Now, when he came on, obviously we did start to improve. And that's when, we were down and then we came back again and we scored another try when he came on. McDermott is definitely the guy to go forward with, yes.
Here's one for you. Taniela Tupou, number 9. Maybe in the future.
Well, I like Taniela Tupou coming off the bench, man. I like Taniela Tupou coming off the bench and really just like it's like in rugby league. There's Mawaki Fotuaika or Fafita, like they're really good off the bench. And sometimes you can get those players who are absolutely unbelievable players, and you want them to start and play with the same intensity the entire game. But sometimes it's just not going to happen because they come with so much intensity that it just doesn't work for the full 80 minutes. So I love Taniela Tupou coming off the bench because did you think that he had a good game first game when he came off the bench? Did you think he had a good second game?
I liked his pass that he did out to Jake Gordon that scored them that first try.
Yeah.
But other than that, I feel like you're mentioning, he's more of that impact player, like late in a match when the other side are starting to get a little bit tired perhaps as well. Like he just breaks the line and he can create opportunities, and the pace that he's got for a big man is just like scary, I guess you could say.
No, it's ridiculous. Yeah, absolutely. In that first game, like I said, he was very good. So, look, I'm looking forward to this game on Saturday. Obviously, we'll talk about that one next week. But, I think we'll have a much better performance there. But I will just quickly say before we move on into the next game is that the biggest problem for the Australians as well is, like I was saying before, that decision-making from the captaincy. Like, I'm sorry, but, do you know what I'm talking about there when they were down 6-0 and they have a penalty literally 5 metres in front, and they decide to take the 3, so they're going for the try. Now, you had massive momentum there. The Wallabies had massive momentum there, 5 metres out. I understand the French were dominating in regards to the scrum and in regards to the pack weight because their weight was much more superior. But there's no way you don't back yourself in there. Like, even if just there's no way, man. Like, go for the line out. Like, go for anything. Go for any scrum. I don't care. Like, don't go for the 3 in that situation. And then what made it worse is that, okay, he decided to go 3, make it a 3-point game. All right, whatever. It's the wrong decision in my opinion, but he still went for it. So you move on. But then later on in the game, we're down by 9 points with 10 minutes to go. And we've got a kick from basically right in front to make it a 6-point game. And instead of that, they take it for the line out and then lose the line out on that line out. And I'm just like, well, okay, so you took the 3 when we were down by 6 to make it a 3-point game, but you're not going to take the 3 with 10 minutes to go. That was 70 minutes ago. This is with 10 minutes to go. You're not taking the 3 to make it a 1-try game. Like, it made no sense to me. So it's just, I just don't understand. Like, what would be your thoughts on that? I don't understand what the decision-making is there.
It's a weird one because of the fact that, like, I feel like we saw it in the South Africa A versus British and Irish Lions game. Anytime they got a penalty even if it was 10 metres out, pretty much put the ball down, tap it off the foot of Ken Owens and just pretty much throw him at the line of the Springboks, which of course you'd think would end up not being a great idea, but he did it about 5 times. He was like, right, I know my job. Here we go. Tap this one and just completely just try and break that line. Like when you're as close as you are, if you're not backing your scrum, like there's always that option of just going for that tap and go.
We went to tap a lot as well. There was a lot of taps in the game. We just didn't do it that time.
So it's a weird one because like the likes of Taniela Tupou would have been out on the field for that early one as well. And to stop him over such a short distance, like you pretty much need one man per leg to just hold him while someone else pushes him over.
Yeah.
Like, so.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. But like I said, I'm excited for that game on Saturday. I think it'll be a good one. I think Australia win better, but in the same sense, I thought they'd win game 2 better, but the team was a little bit lackluster in regards to the selection. So they've got the positives and negatives in both games, and they've moved it into that game 3. So we'll be looking forward to that one, and I probably will be streaming that one on the channel. I think you're streaming it too, so it'll be a good one, that one. But let's move in, as we were just speaking about the British and Irish Lions. Now, they took on basically South Africa. It wasn't, I don't think it affected the rankings at all, but it was South Africa A, which was pretty much just South Africa. Now, South Africa had their game postponed or cancelled against Georgia, due to the pandemic. And then, all these players were moved into this game. So you obviously watched this game. What were your thoughts on it?
I thought overall, for a side that still, I guess, people sometimes forget as well that they haven't had a lot of game time together in like the past little while. Like that game up against Georgia, they were a bit rusty in that first half, but then they kind of started building up.
That was like 2 weeks ago though, yeah?
Yeah. So, and then since then, with that other game being cancelled, they haven't really had a lot of game time at all. And it's one of those ones as well that, like, some of their players, I think they're missing about 10 players due to COVID, if I'm not wrong, that have been taken out of the camp as well, including their captain, Kolisi, which is not ideal going into some test matches. But South Africa A, I think originally we were going to see a lot of different faces, but then we got to see the likes of Cheslin Colby, Eben Etzebeth, as well. I was excited to see his battle with Maro Itoje. And we didn't really get to see it until kind of the last 10 minutes because Maro Itoje, I think he ended up giving away about 3 or 4 penalties in that game, unfortunately for him, which has now, it's got a lot of people saying maybe he hasn't got a spot in that test side when it does come to those games up against the Springboks. But as always, physicality was just the middle name of the Springboks / South Africa A. I said that about 15 times on the live stream, having to slash South Africa A with it. But like,
just call them the Springboks, man. It basically is, man. Like, they're just utilising that as a way to keep their players warm, I guess, because they have been basically 2 years without playing.
And they have actually got another game this weekend now. It's going to be South Africa A taking on the Bulls, which was originally going to be British and Irish Lions taking on the Bulls, but now British and Irish Lions are going to be taking on the Stormers. So South Africa A are going to have another match to warm up before the test series.
Well, the thing is, I told you before that British and Irish Lions game that South Africa will win that game, and you remember that? You remember when everybody said that South Africa were going to win, and you were like,
might be in the mind somewhere.
Might be in the mind somewhere, right? Like, so I called that game, right? It's because South Africa, they are a incredible team that people aren't giving credit for right now, in my opinion. I think, obviously, they won the World Cup in 2019, and now it's been 2 years, and we haven't seen much rugby. We've seen rugby in the Six Nations and Northern Nations Cup, and from the likes of England and France and Wales and Ireland. And then you come and have a look here. We've got the Tri-Nations that we had with Australia, New Zealand, and Argentina. So pretty much everyone's been having a good crack out of those big nations, except for South Africa. So I feel like people start to forget about them quite a bit, and they're not giving them as much credit as they probably deserve. Like, a lot of people are saying, oh, New Zealand are the number one now. And it's like, no, we're going to talk about that in a second. But, no, they've got massive problems in their team as well, to be honest with you. They're still good, don't get me wrong, but let's relax. This South Africa team has just come out against, the best of the UK, basically, and beat them with no real warm-ups besides one game against Georgia. That's the only game they've had recently?
Yep, that is the only one. And they also haven't been able to train for quite a bit of the last kind of few weeks.
The pandemic has massively affected them, so...
So it's very impressive.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that game up against the Bulls, because we did see the British and Irish Lions, they have been able to put on 50 points every time they have played a South African side up till this point. So it'll be interesting to see a South African side play a South African side. And debatably the best South African side out there is the Bulls in terms of that kind of level of the game, although they are missing a few of their players who will be playing for the Springboks as well.
Yeah,
or
of
slash
course.
South Africa A. Oh, I did it again.
It's just called
But
the Springboks, man. Like literally, it literally is just the Springboks, man. So like a couple of players here and there missing, but it's the Springbok. And that was an interesting one for the British Irish Lions to lose that, considering they do have a lot of pride in that UK-based team, and obviously they weren't able to get it over the line there. But they are still tracking quite well. Is that the only set test they've got, the British Irish Lions? They don't come down under at all, do they?
no, it is going to be just those 3 against the Springboks over not this weekend, but the next one. And then from there, after that, I think they're going back to the UK, and then we have to wait for the Australian one. Will be the next one as well, I believe, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, looking forward to it. But let's move into the next game, which is England and Canada. Now, this was a massive blowout here, and I guess it's a good transition because there is a lot of those players out with the British and Irish Lions. How much do you think that would have impacted, considering the score is 70-14 in favour of the English? Do you think that the players that England have out regarding the British and Irish Lions, do you feel like that had a major impact on them not scoring more points potentially, or do you think that might have unsettled them a little bit? I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts about the impact of these players being out, and then teams like England and Wales and Ireland and stuff going out and playing other teams?
I mean, I think they may have scored a few more points, but also we have got this opportunity of seeing a lot of those younger, talented players that we haven't seen too much of. The likes of, like, some of the tries that were scored. 3 for Adam Radwan, I believe is the pronunciation. The number 11, he has got pace to burn, and he's going to be one for the future years that perhaps does get an opportunity a little bit further for England. But also Joe Kokonasiga also had a very good game in that matchup against Canada.
Joe Fijian descent?
Ooh.
If it is, then I'd say Kokonasiga, isn't it?
Possibly. I think I say it wrong.
No, I don't know. I'm asking. Like, I'm not too sure because it sounds, the name does sound very Fijian, so I'm assuming, and that's why I'm just like, oh, probably be Kokonasiga. But anyway, go on, bro.
I think
this
he
me interrupting
for
no reason.
Sale Sharks, if I'm not wrong. But of course, that doesn't make him South African.
You keep going. I'm going to Google it. I'm going to have a look for it right now. But you keep talking.
So you're saying it's Fijian?
I'm feeling like he's got. Obviously, we all know that a lot of the big time teams around the world have Islanders in them. But anyway, go on.
Go the All Blacks. And then also 2 tries for Jamie Blamire in the number 2 jersey. Like, number 2s in these matches for the Northern Hemisphere were going extremely well. Like, Ronan Kelleher in that game for Ireland actually managed to score 4 tries in that one. And Dane Coles, of course, down south here, was able to get 4 tries off the bench for the All Blacks, which you look happy about.
No, I'm just laughing at the fact that obviously, he is Fijian playing for England.
Is he?
He's born in Suva. Born in Suva.
Sam Underhill, he was able to make his 14 tackles that he normally does. Like, he is a very talented player in the loose forwards, as a lot of Kiwis know from that World Cup game. But I think overall England, like, they probably would have liked to put on a few more points if they did have those bigger players. But also, I feel like it's not too bad for them overall because of the fact that these younger, talented players do get a chance to just get a few minutes. I mean, we saw it with Marcus Smith. He was just out there running around, and then in the press conference, he was told, right, get on your plane, you go into the British and Irish Lions as injury cover. Yeah. So it's one of those ones, all you need is to just put your name on the map, and then you could end up anywhere on the map, depending on where that plane ride takes you.
Well, look, I think that obviously, they scored 70 points, so you can't complain with that at all. I thought that Canada were not necessarily as bad as the scoreline suggested. I think they are a relatively up-and-coming team in regard, like, as much as you can. Like, where are they ranked? They are ranked currently. They're actually not. They're ranked number 23, so they're behind Hong Kong, Russia, and Portugal. But they're still top 5. They are still top 5, so we will talk about them. But look, I don't think Canada are as bad as 23 suggests. I think they could honestly take it to a couple of these teams in the late 10s, and I honestly think they could go up against the USA and actually give them some trouble. I still think like a Tonga still beats them, and I think Italy and stuff like that. And then we're starting to get into the big dogs. But yeah, look, I think that Canada actually had a relatively decent showing, considering they are down there ranked 23 against the. What are England now? Number 3 ranked team in the world. I know the scoreline doesn't suggest that at all. And another question that I do have, well, it's not a question, it's a statement. That number 10 for Canada, oh my God, like, he didn't have a good game, bro. He was not having a good game in that one. So obviously it was against England. You can kind of forgive the result in a sense, because when you're down around that 20s area, you don't really look at those games against your All Blacks and Australians and South Africans, England, all that type of stuff, because they are the best of the best, and you're probably going to get beaten quite well. But you are more so, if you're Canada, are looking at those games against the USA or against Uruguay, Romania, Spain, Portugal, those teams around your area that you can see where you are in regards to those just outside of that big dog section. So, yeah, congratulations to Canada for giving it a crack. Just not up to the standards. But I think they played better than a lot of other teams probably would have. And in regards to England, they're not the finished product yet. A lot of people, actually, this is a question for you. A lot of people are actually asking the question about England going forward. Do you still see them as progressing upwards, or would you say they're regressing?
Oh, okay. Well, I believe, if I'm not wrong, they've just won the under-20 Six Nations.
Yeah.
So,
I'm not too sure. I didn't watch the under-20s. I'm not gonna say I did.
So that's one of those ones. I feel like looking forward to that kind of World Cup in a few years' time. In fact, it's only a couple at this stage. It's getting closer and closer every day. But
yes, man.
It's one of those ones. I think that we'll see a lot more of those younger players over the next kind of year or two getting a lot more opportunities in that starting side because of the fact that some of those young guys in a World Cup, like it's almost that unpredictability of almost not knowing too much about them that can really cause a team a headache when you're playing up against them. Because England, like I mentioned, they're up against Argentina, Japan, and also Americas too.
That's a tough group, actually. That's relatively tough, I guess. England, Japan's good, and Argentina are pretty good. That's a difficult group, yeah.
And then you got Samoa, who will also be slotted in there, I think, at this stage.
Of course they are, yeah. Like, sorry, Tonga, but they're going through. Your Tonga, you'll make it too, but you'll have to go through the repechage and whatnot. But yeah, no. And also in regards to, I don't think Samoa competes with the likes of, I think Argentina are too structurally good for them, and I think that England. Anyway, we're not going to talk about the World Cup, but the point of the matter is that what were you saying? Go on. Were you saying something else?
I
think you were talking about England. You were talking about England going forward, progressing or regressing.
I think they are slowly progressing, but I think it is that kind of changing the mindset of perhaps some of the coaches into realizing, like, using the players for name, not form, is just one of those things that we have seen in the past. It gets you so far. But if they want to get all the way to being able to really take it to one of these World Cup sides, like in a semi-final or a final, like they did against the All Blacks, it's one of those ones that I think they want to make sure that they are bringing up those young, talented players. I mean, we've seen it for Wales, Lewis Rees-Zammit. He's going to come out of nowhere, and now he is one of those household names that, he is a future. Well, he's already a star.
You're saying that they're progressing. I would argue that they're not as good as they were when we saw them in 2019. I would say that they're not, and I don't know if they're going to go in as the Northern Hemisphere favourites. I keep saying that the French, because they're quite quality depth, obviously. But yeah, overall, man, I think that England aren't as good, and they have to. They're very structural. They're very structural. England, I think they're the most structured to a T team in the world. I go through different phases with different teams where England are just unbelievably structured, and then you get the polar opposite, which is Fiji, who are just throw the ball and hope somebody's there. Don't know if there's someone there, but we're just going to throw it anyway. Right? So Fiji's that side. England's literally that side for me. Could you say there's a more structurally based team than the English?
Not really. I think they are pretty much
straightforward structure.
Yeah. I mean, they're very good at it at times as well, but it's also, it can kind of backfire when you do need. And I feel like that kind of goes back to those young kind of players who possibly just kind of break up that structure a little bit more, because like they've got new tricks that have been working well for them. The likes of Marcus Smith, I feel like he's one of those players. Everyone is on the hype train for him at the moment for heading into possibly the World Cup in the future, because that's the thing. Do you prefer Farrell at 10 or 12 out of curiosity?
I would probably say 10 personally.
Okay. I'd say it's an interesting one. I feel like depending on who's at 10 from, like the British and Irish Lions, I think he seems to go a little bit better at 12, kind of having the likes of Bigger or also Finn Russell if he was going to be there, although he is injured at the moment, unfortunately. Imagine if they go with Marcus Smith at 10 and Farrell at 12 in one of those test matches. I don't think
they've got a lot of options. They've got a lot of options. But yeah, look, I think that England are always going to be one of the favourites anyway, but I just don't think that they're as dominant as I guess they would have been expecting, considering it's only 2 years out. But anyway, the pandemic threw everyone out of everyone out. So yeah, tough one for them. But let's move on to the next game, which is Netherlands and the Portuguese. Netherlands and Portugal. And Portugal won 61-28. Now, the Netherlands are quite low down. No, sorry, they're actually in the top 25 too. Netherlands are 24th. I didn't realise this. And Portugal are 20th. Now, for me, man, I have actually been taking quite a bit of notice about Portugal in the last year or so, 2 years, and I actually think they're quite a good team. I think that they're really going to start progressing up the rankings, and I think people start to notice them a little bit more. I personally have them right now as probably just, I actually nearly would put them above Tonga. I nearly would. I think that I really like the way Portuguese play. I think it's relatively fluent. I don't think it's as, finished product is that what you'd want, but in the same sense, they're ranked 20th. Like, what else do you want, man? Like, they're not going to be the most unbelievable team. That's why they're 20. But I would have them around the Tongan area. Especially after the last couple of games the Tongans have played. I haven't been a massive fan, obviously, for obvious reasons. One against the All Blacks, 102-0. Other one that we saw was this one where against Samoa. But look, Tonga's still good, but I think the Portuguese are underrated. And in that game, obviously that try was fantastic for the Netherlands. I don't know who scored it and who kicked it, but the kick from the Netherlands, little dink, it was like I don't even know how to explain it. Like, geez, that was unbelievable.
And it's like Portugal as well. They seem to be like their backline seems to be pretty good as well in terms of the fact that 8 tries were scored by their wingers in that match, like 5 for one fella and 3 for the other. So they've just got pace in that backline. And as soon as you
forwards too, they have beefy forwards.
As soon as you kind of inject that pace alongside like being able to kind of win breakdowns, like I feel like that's one thing that these teams that are slightly lower ranked sometimes do struggle with in terms of those bigger matches. Like Tonga, we saw it up against the All Blacks. They just weren't quite able to get those wins in the breakdown, which then kind of keep the momentum not completely drifting away.
Yeah.
But in this one, like I felt like Portugal, like you said, I feel like they could actually work their way out. Are they qualified for the World Cup or do they have a qualifying game? Do you know?
I'm not sure, but I would safely assume they're probably on the way. We should actually find this out for next week. We'll find this out for next week if Portugal do have that qualification process. I assume it's like Europe 2 or whatever groups that would be. But yeah, look, I'm looking forward to seeing Portugal more in the future. Like, there's not a great deal more to talk about that game, but overall, I'm excited to see more of the Portuguese. I think they really are starting to improve themselves, and I'm looking forward to it. They're kind of my European team at the moment, I guess. So I've been really looking forward to seeing how they go. Like, obviously, we all like France right now and how they're progressing, but this is a little bit of an underdog story. And yeah, the Portuguese, I've been enjoying it, to be honest. But let's move into the next game, which we could speak about Wales, Argentina, but I think I want to move to Samoa versus Tonga, because we just brought up Tonga, obviously. And Samoa-Tonga is actually the only game right now that truly means something in regards to a 2-leg series, and whoever scores the biggest margin of win across the 2 legs progresses to the World Cup. The other one has to go through rapid charge. Now, obviously, Samoa won this one 42-13. We both streamed this game. I thought that Tonga were relatively okay for the first half, but absolutely fell apart in the second half. What would you say?
Yeah, unfortunately for them, like they are still missing a lot of those internationals as well. So you got to like feel bad for them in that regard. But it's interesting that, like looking at the stats as well, like Samoa had 42 defenders beaten in that match, which I feel like as soon as you have anywhere near that 14 clean breaks as well, I don't think that Tonga had a single defender beaten. No, that might be a different match actually.
I am talking about. That was, to be honest with you,
USA. But
I still don't know if they did though. Like, just to answer it, I know they probably did, but I couldn't remember it.
Like, they've got a few talented players as well. That's the problem at this stage with some of these sides. Like, they have got those players scattered around, but it's just that consistency of kind of having the whole team be able to put on that performance.
You want to know my problem with Tonga? My problem with Tonga is that they are focused. When you're a small Pacific Island nation, like obviously you guys know I love Fiji, get around Fiji, my daughter's Ratuman, and I grew up in Fiji, right? So I'm a massive advocate of the Pacific Islands and growing in regards to sport. Now, you've got to know that the way the finances are set up and the way that the, I guess, organization is set up is that they need to have the full support to be any kind of good. To be any kind of great, they need to have the full support. Now, if you notice, in league, Fiji is a little bit of a difference here because I don't know if difference is a word, but they're good in 15s. They're actually incoming in 15s. The 7s, obviously, they focus on, and now they're massive. They're the best team in the world, arguably, consistently, but they are simply basically 7s. They're progressing in union and they're progressing in league, but 7s is their main sport, right? But then you get to Tonga, where all their finances and all their focus is going into rugby league right now. They're a very good team rugby league. So because they're focusing on that, they've really blown up on the scene because they can throw their players into the NRL, grow them, and then bring them back to play for their national team. There's nothing really like that for the Tongans right now. And that's why I feel like the Tongan and Samoan teams will actually improve drastically once this Moana Pacifica team comes in for the Super Rugby, because that encapsulates Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji. But Fiji's got Fiji and Drua, so most of the Fijian players will stay with them. But for me, only one sport really prospers in a country from the Pacific Islands. Samoa, I don't think they have much right now. They don't even know what they want to do, whether it be rugby league, who they have a decent team, or rugby union, where they're okay, but they're not really doing a great deal. And Sevens is probably their biggest, I'd say, right now. I'd say Sevens is probably their best because they're still kind of there. But for me, yeah, Tonga doesn't really have too much of a soul in rugby union right now. Would you agree with that? I don't really feel like they have the same energy to compete like they may have once done, and if they even ever really did.
Because it's a tough one because of the fact that, like, I feel like some of those young players that they're bringing through now, like, I love young players, it sounds like, by the sounds of it. That's a terrible statement. That sounds
Interesting
like
statement, mate, but you did say players, and we are
above,
move on quickly.
But like Samoa, they have got their good players in their lineup as well. And Tonga, I think they need to be able to, like, qualifying for the World Cup for them in these next games. I think they have to play Cook Islands, and also there's another
probably
game,
like a Hong Kong or something like that. But Tonga should, like I said, guys, Tonga should be going through the rapid charge and should be beating Cook Islands and should be beating whether it be Hong Kong or whoever. I think they're really the only Asian team that's of note in regards to Oceania area. Yeah, Hong Kong. The next one down is Korea in 31st. And yeah, Tonga should be easily still making the World Cup. But yeah. Point matter is, I just don't feel like they have that kind of soul right now to focus on this individual sport, because they got so much energy into the rugby league, and especially with the Rugby League World Cup coming up right now and the way that they're putting all the youth into the league, I think Tonga Union is suffering. But they've still got game 2 to go. Hopefully they can prove us wrong. But then again, Samoans, they hope that they don't get to prove us wrong, because Samoa will qualify automatically. Tonga will then have to go and play the Cook Islands. Next game, though, let's go back to talk about that Wales-Argentina game, 2020. You streamed this one. What was your thoughts?
It was very close. Like, in those closing moments, like, I think it could have gone either way. And people have made the argument that maybe Wales should have been able to win that game, possibly, because of the fact that Argentina, they had that red card, which I think we were going to talk about a little bit as well. But then also talking about those yellow cards, like refereeing.
I just want to stop you 1 second. Why is someone saying that Wales should have won that game?
I think it was just that man advantage was just going to be too much of.
Exactly right. So that's the massive negative. That's a massive negative, and we'll speak about that in a second, because they shouldn't have won that game. Well, they should have. Actually, you're right. They should have, but not for any reason besides that there was a red card. Like, they didn't play well enough to win, in my personal opinion. I actually thought Argentina played better.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because Wales, they were able to beat 16 defenders in that match. I think that was the only notable stat that I was able to find, other than a whole heap of penalties that we did see throughout the match between the both sides. But yeah, Wales, of course, the Pumas were originally supposed to be playing, I believe it was Romania, for the South American tour, but then that game got cancelled, unfortunately.
They would have absolutely annihilated them. They would have annihilated them.
Although they had a close game with, I think it was actually Romania last week or the week before. The
thing with Argentina as well, is that you got to remember, is that they will regress simply because they've lost that Jaguares in the Super Rugby. So unfortunately, they don't have that connection anymore. But I don't want to sit here and insult Argentina, because I think they're a good team. But in the same sense, like, they might start to begin regressing without that cohesion week in, week out with the Jaguares. But my opinion, man, I don't know if I interrupted you at all, but my opinion is that I think that Wales are overrated. And I'm going to say this. The reason why I say that Wales are overrated right now is because people are very quick to forget that they had an incredibly poor Automations Cup. They were incredibly poor in that. They obviously peaked that 1 year too early before that World Cup in 2019. They were unbelievable. And they were probably the favourites in 2018 before they somewhat crumbled. And I would honestly say that Fiji, if they didn't take that Uruguay game to, easily, and think they'd already won it, and then they lost it, obviously, the big one. Was that Uruguay? I think it was Uruguay. It was a South American team anyway. But the point matter is, Fiji thought they'd already won it. They proceeded to lose it. And then the following game they played Wales, and whoever would have won that would have actually progressed. And I actually think Fiji were the better team in that game that people don't really give too much credit for there. They did lose, but it's because they didn't really have a great deal to play for. Wales did to be over the top of Australia still. But I think that Argentina, showed that Wales, even with that red card for literally, 50 minutes? How long was the red card for? 50 minutes? That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. How are you tying, and how are you letting it be 2013 to Argentina with 7 minutes to go or 10 minutes to go, considering you are a team right now who sit in the top 6? Argentina are down there in 9th, but in the same sense, they have a red card. A red card, you have an advantage. And they were technically the home team, but Wales was the home team. Like, how are you not winning that game, and how are you not winning that game by 20? If you are Wales, who have just come off the Six Nations where they won, yes, okay, they have a couple of players out with the British and Irish Lions, but it doesn't matter. Like, that was a red card. They had a man down for literally half the game, and you didn't win, and you had to rely on a late try to even equalise. What's your thoughts on that? I think they're overrated. I think they are.
I think this podcast is already more like controversy than my whole channel videos.
Well, no, that's the point, man. Like, you can send the fence you like, but I'll say how it is, and that's what I guess this would be good for people to listen to. Hamish might sit a lot more on the fence, and I will tell you what I personally believe anyway. And if you guys want to disagree, let us know in the comment section. Still hit the thumbs up, but let us know in the comment section. But yeah, let us know what you think. What do you think?
I think that second game's going to be an interesting one. I think that it's going to be one of those situations that they've come off playing Canada, and of course it's a bigger step up now for them to be taking on Argentina, because we know how physical Argentina are. So it can easily catch a team off guard when you're all of a sudden are met by guys who are, it's like the All Blacks versus Fiji a little bit as well. When you're going to be going into a breakdown and someone's just going to whack you, if you like charge at them or anything like that, it slightly makes you a little bit hesitant. And there wasn't a lot of experience in that Welsh side. I believe it was Ross Moriarty. Is that the name? I think he was probably one of the most experienced guys out there on the field. I think that's the thing. The Pumas, even though they were down, I think if the Pumas still had 15, they would have won that game actually relatively comfortably.
Absolutely.
Because of the fact that it was actually the fullback, Juan Cruz Malia, I believe it was. He was actually having a very good game up till that point that he did end up getting sent off the field for that red card.
And it was unlucky too, because it wasn't deliberate, but it was head-to-head contact, but it was a very unlucky red card too.
I did enjoy when the front rows both had the player sent off, though, from the referee, who was just like, right, the scrums haven't been working all day. You two can go off, and we'll find two people who might actually be able to work together.
Just to clarify, I'm not saying that Wales are a bad team. I just think that you can't forget their Autumn Nations Cup just because they had one positive tournament in the Six Nations. Yeah, they had a positive tournament there. Everyone else kind of fell apart. Like, would you say right now that Wales or England would win a game between the two of each other?
Oh.
I would go England.
Would you?
I would go England.
Because, I mean, England, they didn't have the greatest Six Nations as well, though.
Exactly what you're saying. What I just said was, don't take one form. Like, let's go back to the Autumn Nations Cup where England still won. French should have won that. In the same sense, Wales were horrific in that tournament. Like, Wales looked terrible in that tournament. And if Wales want to be good, then I will support them all the way to being if they are a good team, I'll give them the credit they deserve. Like I said, in 2018, they were unbelievable. But right now, this is showing that, one, they don't have a great deal of depth because obviously they can't get the job done against a 14-man Argentina for 50 minutes, and we're lucky to even tie it up in the end. So I'm just saying, Wales probably still have a long way to go before they've got 2 years to go until the World Cup. They've got a long, long progress ahead of them. And I think people are also forgetting how much criticism they copped after the Autumn Nations Cup. They copped a lot of criticism. People were starting to say they're like a bridge, like the edge of the top 10 area. And now everyone's like, oh, they're bloody, top 3 now. No, they're not, man. No, they're not. I look forward to seeing them improve, but no, they're not. Do you disagree with anything of what I just said?
Not really.
Not really.
Fair, but
you don't have. It's not insulting, man. Like, this is just rugby chat. Like, yes, if you're Welsh, you probably don't like what I just said, but in the same sense, like, this is rugby chat. Like, I can tell you right now, the Wallabies were terrible. You know, I'm a Wallabies fan. I can tell you when they're not playing good. I can tell you when they're playing good. I can tell you when they're not playing good. You know, I'm about to tell you that New Zealand aren't exactly that great, and All Blacks fans probably won't like what I'm saying. But, you know, you need this polar opinion to put the perspective in the middle, and that's kind of what the Kiwi lads here is doing. And then, you know, got me here, BKRsport on this side, and it kind of comes in the middle. But yeah, I think Wales, for the time being, are overrated based on one tournament. Couldn't even get the job done against a red-carded Argentina for 50 minutes. And I thought Argentina played very well in that game. But quickly, we'll move on past the Ireland-USA game, because that really doesn't have a great deal of effect. 71-10 Ireland. Do you have many thoughts about that game?
Just pretty much same format, I guess you could say, in terms of who was scoring the tries as the England-Canada game. Seems to be like number twos for the rolling mauls at the moment. That is becoming more and more of a move that these sides are going to. We're seeing a lot more sides. Yes, it is up against some sides that they are winning comfortably. So I guess that's kind of maybe why they are going to it rather than going for the 3-pointers. But yeah, Ronan Kelleher able to get 4 tries in that one. And they also have a young and up and coming talent, Robert Balakoon, I believe is the pronunciation. And in the match, he was able to score himself. I think he got 2 tries or 1 try, 138 meters carried, 10 defenders or 10 clean breaks, 10 carries, having a shocker, and 5 defenders beat him. But the pace that some of these young wingers are having, I feel like it's one of those ones, a lot of these guys just aren't getting caught, which does make it very exciting to see how teams try and shut it down. And with the rule changes, did you see the information about the change in the rules that we are going to get to see from August 1st
in regards to?
So pretty much the 50-22 is going to be coming to all competitions that are starting after the 1st of August. So that's going to be the Rugby Championship. We're going to get to see 50-22s incorporated goal line dropouts as well, which means now there will be no 5-meter scrums unless, of course, it is a knock-on, which is going to be an interesting moment. But the ability of them being able to get a line out, an attacking line out, because of now kicking, like it into touch.
Irish haven't really been good with their lineouts for a few years. Were they good in this game? I didn't watch this game. Were they good in this game with their lineouts?
They were pretty solid.
Okay.
Overall, I think 2 or 3 of his tries came from the rolling maul, and then the others were coming from just like backline movements.
I still have that memory of the Autumn Nations Cup where they were even worse than they were worse than Wales. I think they still beat Wales, but they were not great. The Irish in that one as well. You know, they're a team that has a lot of pace about them. They are always a good team. They're never not going to be a good team, but they just seem to not be able to get over that line. You know, they don't seem to be able to get over the line against the big teams. So this is against the USA. They won by 70 points. Cool. You know, I still have a lot of question marks about the Irish going forward. I have a lot of question marks. Like, what would you say is their biggest factor right now? Are they a pacey team, or are they using their forwards? Because I know a lot of the time that they have been utilizing their forwards lately, and they're trying to kind of get a 50-50 mix, but sometimes it just doesn't seem to work for them, and they don't really know exactly what they're doing. Because, for example, Australia is very backs-minded. Very backs-minded. South Africa, absolutely backs-minded. Absolutely backs-minded. New Zealand has a relatively decent mix, but they're still very backs-minded. I feel like a lot of the Southern Hemisphere teams are always focusing on that backs, but like England is absolutely forwards. I would say the French, absolutely forwards. So it's funny how the two different hemispheres kind of have, I guess, you know, Georgia, forwards. Wales, I would say, is forwards. Irish is forwards, but they used to kind of be backs. But what would you say is their main focus?
I think they were very much forwards in the first 2 games that we have seen. Yep. But then it is also, I think, because of the opponent, they did try a few more little, it's like for the British and Irish Lions, the likes of them kicking for the corner in those games up against the South Africa A sides, just trying to use a new technique that maybe they wouldn't have been using. Like South Africa A, in the game that they were playing yesterday, they were taking on those 3-pointers when they needed them. But early on in that match, they were actually still going for the corner to try and really ramp up some points, because that's the thing. A rolling maul can get you so much of an advantage in a game if you have got a strong one. And we did get to see, like, if you can't shut down one of them, you are going to be leaking tries pretty much all day, and teams will just keep on going back to it. Definitely with the 50-22 rule getting added in, because if you bounce the ball in the field of play and also put it into touch then off the bounce, then you're going to have a rolling maul to once again go for. Like Dane Coles, I think he got 3 tries in the match for the All Blacks off that rolling maul. So I think they are trying to incorporate a little bit more of that back kind of mindset, because I know that one thing that Ireland do well, like the likes of Bundy Arki, it is pretty much get the ball and just run it hard at the line, kind of similar to a Laumape kind of type player.
Yeah.
And I think using that and then having the skilled guy on the outside or the skillful like passing of the likes of a Robbie Henshaw or someone like that, I think you can really combine those well for Ireland if they keep on deciding to use those backs and then just have those big, massive forwards that they can use around the side if they need to.
Finally, guys, the big one, obviously, the All Blacks. Well, there's been a couple of big ones, but this was a massive game. It was a very exciting game. There's a lot to talk about here. We'll be going for about an hour and, hour or so. So this will probably go for 20 minutes. But, All Blacks and Fiji, All Blacks did win the game. Obviously, you're All Blacks and I am massively behind Fiji. But what would you say to me saying that game was ruined?
What are we talking about?
We're talking about the fact that it was an 8-point game with a yellow card to New Zealand, and New Zealand had the ball at the halfway line, clearly threw a forward pass that everyone, commentators were talking about it, I was talking about it on the stream, you were talking about it, everyone was talking about it. Clearly a forward pass, right? It proceeds to not get called as a forward pass. Then New Zealand get 3 penalties in a row to get them onto the 5, and then New Zealand score a try, and then proceed to blow out Fiji. Proceed to absolutely blow them out, and the scoreline, what was it, 57-23. But it was a 31-23 game with, 20 minutes to go there, until that poor call was made. Knowing Fijians, do you think that completely impacted their progress? Because if you give them that 4-pass call, they get a scrum at the halfway line. New Zealand are down a man, and Fiji, who had the momentum, will now progress up the field, and that'll keep the All Blacks still on the back foot there. Now, I know that you're probably going to say that, the All Blacks, they're like Crusaders where they can find a way to win in the last 20 minutes. But I would nearly go as far to say the referee, unfortunately, made a really poor call in this scenario. I'm not going to call it out unless it's a poor call. This was an absolutely poor call, and I believe it changed the impact of changed the game completely.
See, because the thing that I think made it a little bit worse was the fact that it was pretty much that backline movement, and then it was the advantage, and then there was a full pass called on the other side of the field.
Oh, yeah, that one
that wasn't as far forward as the one that they didn't call. But I think in this one, I think Fiji, they could have been in it for a bit longer, but I feel like...
I'm not saying Fiji would have won. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that they lost the opportunity.
Yeah, because I think this was the most points they've scored up against the All Blacks, if I'm not wrong, or somewhere around there.
I'm not too sure. They've never beaten the All Blacks before, though.
But they were playing extremely well. Like, even up to that point, like, there were many times that I was thinking, like, in the back of my mind, are we about to see
a massive upset? Yeah.
Yeah, because it was, like, you were talking about the odds in terms of how
I think
much
it was 56-1 or 61-1 or something like that for Fiji to win. It was ludicrous. I kept telling people on my stream, I said, man, like, literally, you may as well put $10 on that. You may as well, because that's ridiculous odds for Fiji. Fiji are clearly the best Pacific Island team. They are well and truly probably the most underrated team, I guess, I would say, across the entire world. I would say Fiji, the most underrated team across the entire world, because they have such energy, they have such flair, they have such pace, and New Zealand just found that out. I would honestly give Fiji a good chance of beating the Wallabies if they play like they did the other night. And that's the Wallabies fans saying that. I would give Fiji a good chance of beating not South Africa. I would say that they would give a couple of those UK teams a run for their money without the fact of if they were able to deal with the structure, because Fiji have no structure. They have no structure, and that's what can take these teams apart. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised. And that's why Wales had so much trouble with Fiji in that World Cup, because Fiji were able to find their gaps and able to just throw the ball away. But have you noticed that Fiji have started changing their game plan a little bit?
It looked a lot more structured. Like they had a bit more of a plan in this game. And the breakdowns, I think early on they realised that they were actually, like I'd say they got the better of the All Blacks in those breakdowns quite a few times.
Absolutely,
Johnny Dyer, phenomenal game for him.
Dyer.
And then also it was Tuisu also did pretty well, and he had plenty of power, and it was showing
two Fiji and Drua boys, by the way, everyone. Two Fiji and Drua boys.
And I'm excited to see what they can do in Super Rugby as well when Fiji Drua get added in alongside Moana Pacifica. But yeah, it was one of those ones that with that physicality, like it did open up that opportunity for them to be able to really, I guess, still use a little bit of structure, but they still had that unorthodox style that makes it hard to be able to read. And you know that if you've got that ball, it's like that first try, Geordie Barrett, about 2 or 3 of the players who did the draw and pass, got absolutely nailed in those hits.
Absolutely.
Which then, of course, in the back of your mind, you're like, do I want to throw this ball like right now? Or do I want to try and take contact even though I'll get my ribcage like broken in this one?
I think Kurivoli, I don't know if it was Kunivoli or Kurivoli, but he had a very good game, especially considering he was a debutant. He came in and he was really quality for me. I think the Fiji still had a few players missing too. Like Johnny Dyer, like you said, was fantastic. Unbelievable. For me, he was the best player on the field for the Fijians. Albert Tuisun was unbelievable. I think that, Fiji have found a way to utilize some form of structure with their free-flowing gameplay.
Because I do see that they have gone with Sorovi, and also it will be Lamani who will be starting at 9 for this match now. So
I like Frankie Lamani. I do. I think he's another Fijian drill boy there, but I think that New Zealand probably come in with a bit more of a idea. That was a surprise. That was Fijians coming out with a bit of a shock, and I feel like it probably will be reined in a little bit with the All Blacks. Like I said, I don't believe the 57-23 scoreline is justified with that game. I just don't. I think that the All Blacks are not as good as what their scorelines are suggesting right now. Obviously, you're an All Blacks fan, so you can respond to me however you like after this, but I'm going to tell you my perspective. I feel like for some reason, New Zealand fans are looking at that Tonga game, that 102-0 win against Tonga, as if it's like the best thing since sliced bread. They're looking at it as if it means anything. It means that, New Zealand the best team in the world again. I had many comments on my stream saying New Zealand are, again, the best team in the world. I'm like, well, hold on a second, right? Let's go back to the Tri-Nations last year when they lost one of their games to the Wallabies, mind you. The last time the Wallabies and All Blacks played, the Wallabies won. Now, yes, the Bledisloe Cup, blah, blah, blah. Cool, we get it. 20 years. I understand, right? But that's not the point. In the Tri-Nations, the All Blacks, they won the first game and they lost the second game to Australia. Then with Argentina, they lost the first game and won the second game, right?
Yeah.
So, the All Blacks didn't have a great Tri-Nations tournament. And the only reason they won was because Reece Hodge didn't know how to kick a damn well ball. He missed 2 kicks against Argentina for 2 draws or whatever. But, the All Blacks, just because they beat a Tongan team that is not great right now, as we spoke about before, it didn't mean anything to me. That was just another game of them warming up. This game then shows that realistically, they're not as good as you would be hoping for right now, and they still do have a lot of problems in this team. Would you disagree?
I would say that I think 13 changes in that starting lineup did have just a little bit more of an effect on them than they probably anticipated, with the fact that they were trying to rotate everyone around. So I think this weekend, it's a tough one, because I think for this match that is coming up, Fiji probably had the best chance of beating the All Blacks in that first week, the last weekend's game, because now the All Blacks, they are going to have, I feel like, I don't think it's going to be an absolute blower, but I think there is a chance, a small chance, that maybe they could end up winning this game by around the same points, if not a few more.
Well, that'd be more justified if that was to happen, because obviously it wouldn't be down to an incredibly dumb call in regards to not being able to call the 4 pass, and then that being 3 penalties for a try and then blowing out. So I feel like if it happened again, then that would be more justified in regards to the second result, because it wouldn't be based on a poor call, in my opinion. Yes, obviously Fiji still allowed it to happen, but the heads go down after shit like that happens. It's part of rugby, it's part of sport. But overall, man, I think the Fiji played very well. Yeah, look, they didn't get the win, but it was a moral win for them. It was a moral win. It was a gutsy performance, and obviously we got to see a lot of those players come out and shine. That I found was a really quality thing for Fiji, who obviously haven't seen a great deal of rugby in a long time. They played one game against Georgia in the last 2 years, and that was in the Autumn Nations Cup, and they won. They won 57-28 or something like that. It was a pretty big scoreline, but that was the first time Fiji played in literally since the World Cup. So, yeah, look, I'm very excited to see how Fiji go. I honestly think Fiji could throw a spanner into that pool of Wales and Australia in the World Cup if they keep progressing, because they are, for me, the equivalent of France for the Southern Hemisphere, but just not anywhere obviously near as structured and obviously less experienced and not as quality. But I believe that Fiji and France's game style are similar in regards to the Northern and Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, right. I got a fun question for you.
Okay.
So in your pool, of course, you have got Wales once again.
Mm.
Let's say they go through, right?
It's in Wales and Australia?
Yeah.
Or
so
just Wales?
Just Wales at this stage.
Okay.
You can only choose either the Wallabies or Fiji to make it through to that next stage.
I'm taking the Wallabies.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm taking the Wallabies because for me, like in rugby league, it's different because Australia always wins. So you get kind of over and you kind of I'd want Fiji to beat Australia, right? But in rugby union, the Wallabies have been terrible for 20 years. Like I'm a long-suffering Wallabies fan, and I'm absolutely taking the Wallabies over there. Like that is still my country. I'm still from Australia, and the Wallabies haven't done anything since arguably 2003 when they were in the World Cup final against England, right? So absolutely I'm taking the Wallabies to progress, and absolutely because they're the only ones who would have a chance. I'm sorry, but Fiji aren't going to win the World Cup. If they do, I'll be cheering just as loudly as everyone else out there. I'll be having a party in bloody Nandi. We'll be having a massive party. But I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. So realistically, the only hope out of those two teams would be that Australian team, and they're progressing well. They'll progress fine. So yeah, I'm taking the Wallabies. But anyway, that's done for the results for this week. Unless you have anything else to say about the All Blacks and Fiji game.
I'm excited to see the next one. I feel like it's one of those ones as well that Fiji's physicality, like if they can match that, like they've changed their whole, pretty much almost the whole loose forward trio. I think they've got Artie Savia coming back for the All Blacks, but then Fiji going to be starting Yato. And I feel like that's one of those ones that, like those two, I want to see Fiji
you never
do
know
well
how
again.
Fiji's going to play. You'll never, no one will ever know how Fiji's going to play because you don't know, like they don't even know how they're going to play. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't even know. It's just, they're an unknown team, literally unknown team. But before we jump off, we do have something that we're going to be doing literally every single week, and that is the best player performance of the week and also the best team performance of the week. Now, with player performance, man, I'm going to give you the option here first. Which player performance would you like to take as your player performance of the week?
Okay, I'm going to get a little bit strategic here as well, and it's a little bit of a cheap one, I guess you could say. But I have gone with someone who has had 2 good games in a row, and that is Anthony Geelong for France, because of the fact he's made
I don't know what was your point you were saying. Were you trying to say because he's French against Australia that's like a negative thing?
No, I was more saying because of the fact that if you were basing it off individual performance in each game, he probably wouldn't quite be the player of the week. But because of 2 back-to-back good games as well, I decided, like, he's had a lot of tackles. I think he's made around maybe 38 in 2 games, whole heap of turnovers, 1, and he's just been captaining France very well in those games.
Man, I couldn't disagree with you. You know, your player performance of the week is literally your choice. You can figure it out however you want, man. It's there's no basis for it besides player performance of the week. For me, I'm going to go with Johnny Dyer. I'm going to go with Johnny Dyer. I thought he was absolutely fantastic for Fiji. I thought that without him, Fiji wouldn't have been able to get any kind of that mongrel going and that push forward going. I think he was just so dominant with his runs, and I just think he was everywhere where he needed to be. And I think that Johnny Dyer was a massive mental asset as well for the Fijian team going forward. And, you know, it's great to see him. You know, I've interviewed him before. I've seen him before and met him before and talked to him before on my videos and my vlogs when I did Fiji Injury games. And he's a great bloke. And I'm so glad to see that he's just killing it right now. And hopefully he has another good game. He's playing on Saturday, yeah?
Yep, he is. Starting 6.
Yeah, can't wait. Buddy, brilliant. Love it. Love your work. Love your damn work. But team of the week, and I'm going to have to go Fiji. I am. I'm going to have to go Fiji. What's your team of the week?
Well, that's just beforehand. You did mention that it probably wasn't going to be.
I know I did that because I didn't want you to know who my team was. I didn't want you to know who my team was. But yeah, I'm going Fiji. You know, they took it to New Zealand and were unlucky in regards to the refereeing, in my personal opinion. And unfortunately, let their heads get down after a poor call. It's just it happens all the time. You know, it happens all the time in sport. Once a poor call gets made, they let their heads get down. New Zealand probably still win the game, but we don't know. You know, the opportunity was taken away. I think Fiji played fantastic. I couldn't give you a team like look. England played Canada. You know, Ireland played the USA. There's no Argentina could arguably get this too. To be honest with you, you know, I'll go Fiji, but Argentina is definitely a good shout too. But my team of the week is Fiji.
Right. Okay. So pretty much I was thinking along the same lines, and that's not just to agree. It's because of the fact that when you look at the games, like you mentioned, you've got those games that is a high-ranked opponent versus a lower-ranked opponent. Like even because Samoa for me was almost a decent shout, but then again, it was up against Tonga in that game, unfortunately. So I feel like
again. And
it's
it
still
had a lot of
case.
to it.
It was a good game for Samoa, like with the amount of defenders that they did beat. But I feel like because of the All Blacks being the opponent, like, because I guess you could say France also, like in that game with the amount of tackles they had to make, it was pretty impressive that they didn't let the Wallabies through, but then the Wallabies were their own worst enemies, like
Absolutely.
by having about 15 handling errors.
Australia should have won that game. Yeah.
It's one of those ones. I think Fiji have got to be right up there as well. But my honourable mention, I am going to say Samoa as well, just because of the fact that now they've got that spot in the World Cup, unless, of course, they lose this next game to Tonga. We're sitting here
35 points or something like that.
Imagine that.
No.
Well, it truly twists it. Because what happens if it's a draw? That was something that I got asked a lot.
It would go to extra time or something like that. I would safely assume it would go to extra time. They would have to do it. They would just decide to do it on the spot, I would safely assume. But unless it's higher ranked, I don't know. But my honourable mention would go to Argentina because they got through 50 minutes against the Welsh, who, with a red card, you know, they had a red card for 45 minutes, 50 minutes or whatever it was, and were still able to tie the game and were unlucky in losing that game, you know, late on, or unlucky in tying that game late on where the Welsh were able to get it over. But that's going to do us for today. Obviously, we've been speaking here for probably about, you know, an hour and 10 minutes or so. So we obviously hope you have enjoyed. This is the first rugby podcast, the first Rugby Down Under podcast. And we hope you have enjoyed because I definitely had a great time.
I will get better, hopefully, as we go on through these podcasts. I'm not used to this kind of interview.
Man, it's the first time. It's the first time we've done this. So, you know, you can't expect it to be the best thing. I don't even know really where to look. I don't know if I'm looking at you or looking at what I'm doing or looking up at the camera. You know, we're all over the shop. So this is the first time, man. You know, we won't really get... It's the beginning of the season, realistically. You know, we still have the whole Bledisloe Cup coming up soon. We have the, you know, the Rugby Championship. You know, there's a whole heap of rugby that we're going to be getting into. And, you know, we're only 2 years away from the Rugby World Cup. And hopefully we can even continue this when the Super Rugby is on and we can talk about the Super Rugby instead, I guess, because there's not really a great deal. When does rugby... No, because we do have the Six Nations in February. But we'll see how we go.
The United Rugby Championship also going to be starting up in around September, I believe it is.
Exactly right. So, yeah, that should be quite good. But look, guys, that's going to do us for today. We do hope you have enjoyed. Hit that thumbs up button. Obviously, go and check out the Kiwi Lads on YouTube as well. He does his own streams for the All Blacks and for, well, he's from an All Blacks perspective, but he does all different teams. We will be streaming on BKRsport as well all weekend long. Looking forward to it. We've got the Rugby League. We've also got the Rugby Union between New Zealand and Fiji, and probably as well that Australia versus France game. Might even get up early for one of those European games as well. Anyway, guys, jumping off. Appreciate you. Don't let anybody tell you you can't do something. Live your passion, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Catch you later. So.